Good evening. Let's call the meeting to order. And let's do roll call. Roger,
Here.
Carl,
Yep.
Marlene is absent. Susan here, Brian,
Here.
Marie here, all right. Dawn here, Colton,
He's
I am sick in here, but it's a little under the weather.
oh, I'm glad you stayed there and not here.
I agree.
But sorry that you feel sick. Is there a motion to excuse Marlene?
Make a motion. Second, excuse me.
All those in favor of excusing Marlene?
Aye.
Okay, let's see. Guest business. Do we have any guest business? You are on the agenda. In fact, action items. Let's see, approved last month's minutes. Anybody have any changes to the minutes? Everybody get a chance to read them, or do we need time to read them? Okay, is there a motion to approve the minute?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of November 9th, 22.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, they are approved. So we also have the code updates to Title 10. Did everybody get a chance to go through that? No? I'm just gonna give us a few minutes to go through that. Or a minute or two. I did see some.
Quick question, I might be nickel and diming on 10-3-190. It added volleyball as something that can't be done in the park.
That would be in areas not designated for it.
Okay,
So the great lawns are designated for
right,
those
okay.
type of, but we would want to not have it in places where there'd be a conflict of use for
Okay.
other users, like in the playground.
Right. I was just thinking somebody can toss a football though.
Yeah, that was
It's
my
like-
same exact.
I'm to
question.
nickel and dime it. We want to open it up for
Yeah.
recreation, but
Yeah.
be safe.
Because people are gonna throw frisbee, footballs, and so when you say designated area, do we actually designate? Is there signs that said this area is open, or can we put something in there that delineates some more?
Can we repeat the code number that is under so that? we
Yeah.
go to it?
10-3-190.
190, thank you.
Mhm.
It's, so to read the whole thing out loud, it says no person shall practice or play games in which objects are projected or airborne. Such as, so this is where it gives examples, but it's not limited to.
Okay.
And so it's any game in which items are projected or airborne. It currently lists golf, baseball, horseshoes, crickets, polo, lacrosse, archery, or hockey. And so we wanted to add the one of volleyball. My staff started to go down the list of badminton and all of the different types, horseshoes. And we said, look, the projection really excludes all of those items in places where we don't allow them. So the Great Lawn is somewhere that we do allow those. What we're trying to do is keep it out of playgrounds, keep it out of the shelters themselves, the beach areas, places where people are generally using the land in another purpose and it would conflict. And so our park rules are a separate thing. This is the ordinance are the law. And then the rules, designated areas, all that stuff comes in the form of another document, another place on the website, which we are in the process of redoing as well.
So what is the purpose of going through this Title 10? Are we voting on this, or is it just something 'Cause I haven't had time to read it, and I'm not gonna be able to read it right now, so.
It is, for the park board, it's a code amendment. So we have some updates and part of my presentation will go over just briefly, and I can do that now if you'd like to. But it is, the park board is the board that, would give direction on that and then, forward it on as a recommendation to city council for adoption. So the things that, that we would be looking at updating in Title 10 is most of the references for the director reflect the planning and community development director. With the formation of the Parks Department and Sarah's position of the Parks and Recreation Director, we need to update that language so that she's the director for these items. The other things are, is we've noticed in the parks that we have uses that have not been allowed that really are common uses. And we know that as people are using our parks now more, we're seeing that we need to have maybe some more flexibility. So the canopy is a common size of a canopy, and that's where they're erecting it for shade. We need to give people the opportunity to provide shade in the parks and areas where the trees are not mature yet. So those are a common sizes of 12 by 12, and our code didn't allow for that. And then also the use of small propane grills. So if you are at Lundin, if the shelters are rented, you have no ability to barbecue in the park because we don't allow the charcoal barbecues except where the shelters are, and they come with the shelters. So we thought the flexibility of allowing the small tabletop type propane barbecues would give people the flexibility. We see them in the parks quite a bit. We know that they can be used safely, and so we would like to offer that flexibility for people to be able to use them. Some of the other things are now we're seeing greater volumes in our parks. We're seeing now, especially with North Cove coming on, and we've observed behaviors that are not consistent with park users. So if you are going to play a game of volleyball, absolutely, in the Great Lawn, you would be able to do that. But if you want to play volleyball on the playground, you know, kids aren't paying attention. And so we don't want anyone being injured by that conflict of use. And then also recreational wheel devices. There was some conflict of use of using the bikes on the playground or where, you know, on the picnic tables. And so we would like to have people using recreational wheel devices where it's safe to do so and where it's not going to be damaging property or hurting someone. So that, oh, and then we also had separate sections for vaping and then tobacco, but really they can be captured under the same and simplify that section of code. And we did have the police department go through, as you know, a lot of Title 10 has to do with water skiing and water events and lake management. So the police department went through the sections for their enforcement and made comments where applicable, and then also confirmed that the same RCWs and the same terminology are still used in a greater in a greater lens. So the lifeguard or the life jackets, for instance, used to be approved by a commission. They're now approved by the United States Coast Guard. So we updated that language. There were not any real major substantive changes of use other than just kind of further defining it. And then also taking into account that we've now annexed the entire lake and we are the enforcement for the entire lake. It used to be just the cove. So as we've now annexed all of the areas around the lake, it falls under our management. And park permits. We've had some, just as we pull permits as people have events in the parks, we realized that some of our language was a little outdated. And we wanted to make it clearer for people when they're applying for park permits, whether they go to an event permit or if it's a park permit. So we put some of that criteria in there.
Thank you, Jill.
Absolutely.
Anybody have any more questions or comments?
I'm just go back to the volleyball one because I'm that person. If there was a possibility to do including but not limited to, I don't know, the projecting objects.
So the language. So the language we put in is games in which objects are projected or airborne, such as.
Okay,
And so it
All right.
points to the example. Kind of the process I understand is once it passes here, it does get to go next to the city attorney. And so they get to play with all the wording one way or the other in order to see what they need to update as well. So this could slightly change past that. And then still through city council.
Another change too that was listed in there is historically in the Lake Stevens is not allowed any metal detecting in any other parks.
Right.
And we know the reasons behind that. We don't want people digging in our parks and unearthing things or taking artifacts from the parks that would be not allowed. But we do know that if you lose your wedding ring in the lake, you would want to be able to locate it or something of that nature, you know, your glasses fall off. And so with written a permission by the director, then that would be allowed now. So offering a little bit more flexibility.
And do you want a motion to accept the changes or a motion to?
It would be a motion to accept the proposed changes in Title 10.
Okay, that's the.
And those are the ones that are in red.
Correct. So anything added to the codes will be underlined in red and anything stricken from the code will have a strike through. And they'll be in either red or blue, depending on which staff member works.
I see a couple of little things in purple just to clarify on colors, but essentially. It's not.
I had a question on section 10.04.040 regarding this has to do the definition of darkness. And I swear I remember seeing like 30 minutes. There was like 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after, so it wasn't like a hard stop when the sunset went down. I don't see that as a change in here, but that's, I remember seeing that before somewhere.
So with these definitions are specific to chapter 10.04, which is going about water safety and watercraft. So it's a little bit of a different section than above. I believe that all of these definitions come from the state watercraft.
Right, so the definition of darkness would be different. Are you referring to like our park hours where we say dusk?
No, I'm referring to, I'm actually in that section that's like water related.
Are you on page 23?
I'm on page, 23 to 51, and I'm part of the power squadron too for voting. And maybe that's where that's coming from, because I've got that definition of the darkness part. So anyway, but I've seen it defined a little bit. I don't know. I don't see it more broadly, but at least to give people a little bit of grace. So
Usually it's a half hour before
I said 30
sunrise and,
half hour before
or after,
or after,
after or before.
half hour before sunset, half hour after
Right.
sunrise, or after sunset.
And where would you find that information?
I might have it in
No,
again, USA, the voting power squadron stuff that I do, but it's a pretty common one. I don't know if we've had it through American Water Ski Association too.
I meant through the city. Is it something you think needs to be in the code?
I just wouldn't want someone to be penalized in some way for something that all of a sudden the sun went down and they were still out there doing something. That's all.
And what she's saying is currently that how we are defined.
Right.
Is the period between sunset and sunrise. So
Right.
you're saying that, darkness should.
There's
be
no gray.
considered Within, the half hour.
Right.
So that this is something that has been reviewed by our police department and they're the ones that recommended this, but I don't think we had a specific conversation about it.
We can definitely bring that back to them and ask them, and it may be, you can be out on the lake after darkness, but there's different rules that apply. So you have to be illuminated. There's different requirements. And if you're water skiing, then you'd need to get in your boat, at the time of darkness. So that would be at the end of sunset, which would be dark. But but I would check with them and see if they wanted to further define it, or if there's a reason that it was captured in this way. And then, we can incorporate those. If needed.
I think it should stay darkness or sunrise to dark or sunset instead of giving another half hour or something that's arguable and someone could just, the official time sunrise and official time sunset.
Spoken like a fisherman.
Any other comments, questions? Anybody like to make a motion?
Make a motion to be approved.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passes. So our next item is to appoint 2 members of the Parks and Recreation Planning Board, us, to the Arts and Parks Foundation. And I was on the board, Carl was on the board, Marlene was on the board, and I have withdrawn from being on the board. And because we didn't want to have 3 people, because we could vote. If we were down to just 5 people, we could at a meeting. And there were 3 of us that wanted to do something for the foundation, we could vote. And you really don't have the power, the park board doesn't have the power to override it. And so I have stepped down from the foundation board, but I'm still a member of the foundation. Does that make sense? So my recommendation is I would like to nominate Carl and Marlene because they have been on it from the inception. And Marlene is the treasurer. And we all know Carl has a wealth of information to bring. And so that's my recommendation. Any discussion?
So once you make a motion, there can't be a discussion. It would have to ask for a first, a second, and then go into
Oh, then it
a
goes to
vote.
the-
But I would like to talk about that and clarify the why to give everyone a good understanding before that.
Well, that was my discussion. Right,
So you used the words that you recommended 2 individuals.
yeah,
and
and that's
so
a
that's-
motion, that
that's
makes
a
a
motion.
motion. Oh, okay. Anybody like to discuss?
Well, I'd like to just say that I have no problem with Carl or Marlene, but these new board members might want to take part and, get a new view of, the situation going on. And I think they should be able to, say if they'd be interested or not before jumping in. But I'm all for Carl and Marlene.
I'm just more curious on what, some elaboration on what you guys do currently.
Well, we'll have some news for you here. And a demonstration, which should,
Yeah, we do have a little bit of a staff report I'd be happy to share with you, the Arts and Parks Foundation. So in each year, we have some park board members that are appointed to the Arts and Parks Foundation. And they liaise between the Arts and Parks Foundation and the Parks Board. The foundation is a nonprofit charity that performs fundraising for art and parks within the community. And the selection of the board members are done in the first quarter or the first meeting of the year.
Can I say something before you continue? But it used to be a Parks Board and there used to be an Arts Board. And at one time, some of the Park Board and some of the Arts Board got together. And then after we did that for a while, then they shifted out to make it more of a Arts and Recreation and Parks Board. So that's how it came about, how it merged, because it used to be separate arts and parks.
Yeah, there used to be an arts commission. And the Arts Commission is no longer there, so a lot of the people that were on the Art Commission have migrated to the foundation.
So I have a question, Tina. So if you step down from the board,
Mhm.
And but you're still on the, you're
A
still on the
member.
member.
Mhm.
And would Carl and Marlene still be members even if they weren't on the board as well? Is that, or would they have to be elected to the board in order to continue? I'm curious about that. I understand.
Well, we happen to have the president of the board right here,
You're in luck.
and I'm wondering,
So, Tina did step down, and she's now on an advisory. We created an advisory. To the Art and Parks Foundation. So that allows her to be participating, but she's not on the board, and she's not. She's not on the board and she's not a voting member of the board, but as a member of the advisory committee, she can come to the meetings, she can always address the board. And and actually, I asked Tina if she wouldn't spearhead getting the advisory board moving forward. We have a number of people, quite a few people who want to be on the advisory board. And bring us ideas and put their shoulder to the wheel when we do events and help us out. So we have to get that going. And that's what we're looking at Tina to do. But that then brings it back down to the 2 members from this board, from the Parks Board to the Arts and Parks Foundation.
Gotcha.
did that answer your question? Fred?
Yes, thank you.
So I had brought up the number of members on both the foundation as well as the government body. And so I want to take a minute to talk about what those differences are. So this is the Parks and Recreation Planning Board. You are with our government who represents the Parks Department. You are the liaison between the public, making sure the department's always making the best decisions and making recommendations to City Council to best serve the citizens with our Parks and Recreation departments and our public parks. The foundation is a separate 501c3, which is a nonprofit. And it is important that they are 2 separate bodies and that you never have too many members on the same boards, as it starts crossing the boundaries about what is in the best interest of government and representing the people versus the interest of a foundation who is promoting a specific cause and raising funds for a certain thing. And so like any committee, whether it would be this foundation or a school board or any other number of different boards, so a senior center even, we would want to make sure that there's never a chance to have a majority of our parks quorum with a special interest, because then you're no longer representing the best interests of the government. Does that make sense to everyone, or do you have questions? Okay.
I just like to tell the 2 new members, I mean, if you're interested, you should go with Tina from an advisory position, and then she can fill you in more, and then like he said, they need more advisors, so if you want to get your foot, so to say wet, there's your a chance to do that. Or if you'd like to become a member of the board.
And what the foundation does is raise funds for arts in the park. And we're going to hear about how we're raising funds to put some art on the splash pad. And so that's its purpose, is to raise funds and support the city. Like the city has mentioned before that maybe the foundation would put the sensory garden in, raise money for the sensory garden. But not a formal request, just a suggestion out there. And so so it's things like that. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, my original one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We, just as an aside to that, we will have to do some research on the votes. Because if you are functioning on the board or you're an advisory to the board, we just need to check on what the legality is of that. And that would come into play if you would have to abstain from certain votes
Yeah, that's what I
for
was
funds
thinking.
and designs. So if we end up with the majority of our board on the Arts and Parks Foundation or the advisory board, we would not have a quorum for any votes.
Mhm.
So we would need to do some checking on that. Because if we have a board of 9 and 5 serve, once they abstain, we can't have a passing vote number.
Hmm.
But didn't
So-
you say that the advisory board doesn't vote?
They
Well-
would still have the interest of being on the Arts and Parks Foundation, so we do need to check on that
Yeah.
for the
That's a really good point, Jill. If I abstain. Yeah,
and if Carl and Marlene, you know, like for last year, you know, if they were on there. Go ahead, Carl, I'm sorry.
If you're interested, we do have a meeting tomorrow here at 5. With the Arts and Parks Foundation.
Be 3 days.
Hmm.
And so you can come and
So-
see.
I might not be able to be on the advisory board.
So-
either.
We have to,
You're not a voting member yet, no.
Well, I think Jill makes a good point though, because I would abstain because I am bringing forth information. Huh, okay,
if you'd like, we can table this and then check with our legal
Yeah.
counsel or MRSC.
Yeah.
And get some information to move forward for it.
okay.
We can bring that back to
So it comes back to, is there a motion for who we would like to elect to the foundation?
I make a motion.
Go ahead, Carl. I was just gonna say, I mean, if you were gonna nominate anyone today and no one has any, questions or wants to join, I just say. Just nominate you and Marlene again if Marlene's willing. Unless Colton, you want interested?
Sorry, trying to find my mute button there. I don't think right now would be a great time for me to throw my name in the hat. I really appreciate the mention there, but I think right now it's my time constraints are a little tough. Hopefully in the near future though.
Ladies, you'd like to throw your hand in the ring or?
Not this time. Yeah, I'm doubling down on Colton's time.
Okay. Then I'll go back to, that's not. I know what you wanted to table, if you wanted to table the advisory thing or the vote, because I recommend, Carl and Marlene again, if Marlene's willing. But if it has to do with this advisory thing and we have to hold up to find out everything about it, then I'll hold off, but as of now, I'd recommend Carl and Marlene.
I think we could vote to appoint 2 people and then just come back and figure out what my role can be. Right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Right, then I second that motion.
all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, motion passes. Congratulations, Carl and
Well,
Marlene.
nice job again.
Okay, now, those are our action items. Now we're on to our discussions. And we are going to learn about the Arts and Park Foundation's seat wall at North Cove. And I turn this over to former Mayor Spencer.
We want to just give a quick update on where we are with funding and implementation of the tile that is going to go on the wall. We call it the seat wall, but it's about right next to the flash bomb. And there'll be tile on the opposite side of what you're looking at that has this artwork on it, which the city council has seen and approved. And if you look closely, you can see it goes from the mountains down, follows the stream. And it's more active with animals, water, so it's all the way down to the lake. And these tiles will be, it's really fortunate. It's these in this day and age, we can have tiles made that are industrial strength. Both the tiles themselves and the printing on them. And we can print them out almost like a printer would in the office building.
Excuse me, John.
Yeah.
Would you like me to take that and pass it on so everyone can see?
Walking around like this,
I can't really see it from there.
It's pretty light, isn't it? And it's one whole long piece.
Yeah, they have to remember a piece. Yeah. On a whole long piece. The city actually paid for the artist who did this work after we went through a process to select the artist. And she has prepared all of this work. We have talked to a tile company that can print it for us. I have to tell you that that was before the pandemic. And before our current inflationary period. Our estimate for doing this on the wall is around $15,000. I would hazard this to guess that we're probably talking more around $20,000. And before we're all done with it. So the way that we're looking at funding it is a number of ways. One, we're looking for donations from companies and corporations that would be interested in having recognition for having helped fund this artwork on this tile wall. And in that case, the names would be on a brass plaque at the end, each end, recognizing that John Doe's company generously donated funds for the construction wall. And then we have also the raising money by selling fish. And I haven't seen, you're not done. This would, we have these fish, and you can buy a fish, and it will have, and it will be mounted on this wall. And it will have any kind of recognition of your family. Like Marlene, whenever it says Marlene Sweet. I think Carl has one here. Is it on here, Carl?
Yeah, it should be the middle
Yeah, I
one.
think it's because Charles Cochran. As here.
Yep, 1925 to 62.
She's actually humble individual and didn't want, you always call this not the case here. So, the small fish is $100, the middle-sized fish is $200, and the large fish is $300. We've already told something around 10, 12 of these. And Joe made a recommendation to me the other day, which I think is very good. Let's start getting the fish out there for people to see and say, how do I contribute to this? Fish will go on the wall, what you can see right now, be on this side. And we put them in so they obviously look like they are. Okay. They will be attached to the wall so that if you're sitting there, you're not going to scrape the back of your leg or that kind of thing. And, really, children or anything else can hurt themselves like that. We've done quite a bit of research to make sure that we don't create a hazard as a result of doing this work. So that's kind of that's the major project that the foundation has underway right now. We get into other items on the agenda here. I can tell you a little bit more on the foundation's activities and ventures. It's next on the agenda, so I'm just asking you ask questions, but if you want to have any questions about what we're doing and so on.
I just have a question about the cost. What is the main cost?
The main cost is in, well, the main cost is in both of these. So the one is in production of the tiles. That's the principal cost. And then the other cost is in actually making these fish.
And installation.
Yeah, and installation. We have a very conservative estimate on installation because we expect that there will be. That's another way to donate to this. If you do tile work, and you live in the city and you want to supervise the installation of the tile and get a number of people here to help. You know, mix mortar and put the tile and that's another way to do it. That is the two major costs. Otherwise, it's all on.
I've forgotten the height of the tile.
It's great. It's about 14 inches.
That's the wall, right?
Pardon me?
I was thinking of the
Oh,
tile.
each piece.
Right,
Well, we'd have
okay.
maybe four, it depends, because that's a concave wall. And it's curved, so we can't have it too big of a tile, we'll have too big of a space. And make it around the curve. So they're gonna be fairly small. But the beauty of it is you can have your tower, the main television on. And it's a printer that just literally puts on the top and then it goes to a having process and then a recording process to her. Graffiti protocol.
That's, yeah,
Yeah.
that was gonna be my question, is for both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
These are aluminum. One in stainless steel. Now that's the, you know, metal image, hopefully, you know, not the thing is the other possibly, you know. We can't put a coating on this. Or they can actually, by some heat treatment, they can give them a little different. We didn't have these these samples. They're not that way, but you know they can.
Is the. Two questions.
Yeah.
How many letters can you put on the fish? And is it a set font for all the fish, or some gonna have big letters and some gonna have small letters, or?
We're, right at the moment, we're using this side of plaque that you see right here,
Okay,
and that font, I can't tell you what that side of that font is.
I just wonder if someone wanted to write a long story on there, you know, so the font's gonna be a standard.
No, actually, we've talked about that kind of word, and we. Jim Hayden did the research with the. In the beginning, through these forms, and we want to keep it a little fun. Very small, with that size right there. Don't say, you know. Sorry by the Spencer family here. And leave it at that.
So do you know how many letters you can get on the plaque then? I mean, if someone asks, I want, how many
We
letters?
will.
You
I
okay,
haven't notes in there.
okay,
Yeah, you've seen where they have brick tiles and you can walk in and you
Right.
see that. That's kept very simple. So that's our big push for 2023. We have a couple of other things we're working on. Supporting the city. There's a music garden at Frontier Heights Park that we've been supporting the city on, getting funding for that. We will work with them. Events for the summertime. That has yet to be determined, but we were very involved in the music or at the during the farmers market and bringing in bands and so we'll work with the city on all of those activities. Well, I can move into the next item. If you- it's right on.
Yeah, go
We
ahead.
also have the Lake Stevens Band.
Yeah, and thank you, Carl. We also have the Lake Stevens Community Band, which I hope you've heard. And it's entirely volunteer and people, they actually have to pay a fee each year to be on it. I think it's $25. And we've had as many as 25 people. And I think the last event they were at is something like 18 or 19 of the musicians showed up. But it's a wonderful band. They do a lot of different kinds of music. But it's a brass band. It's a brass band.
can I ask you one more question on the tiles? Okay, so it's one long tile thing, then you were saying at the end, you're gonna have, is it like sponsorships or individual?
You're looking for the ball, there's a slope space at the end.
Uh-huh,
And we'll put on in brass on, at least that's the plan right now, so.
it's gonna be individual or just business?
I would say like, many things to the following individuals.
Okay.
Case market,
Okay,
somebody's gonna shop, and so on, so. Or if there's individuals, and I know we will be talking to, there's individuals who probably are interested in buying a fish, but I think they put in some very substantial amount of contribution. And it'd be nice to say put their rates on.
Okay.
So, yeah. I'm very, very hopeful we can do this thing, because I think that's a significant piece of our. People see it, enjoy it, kids like it. You probably didn't get a chance to look at it, listen, but there's all kinds of bugs and bunnies and ducks and other kind of animals in here. And if you're a kid running around out there in the splash pond, you're gonna see those little creatures. Frogs, I think there's some frogs in some too. Yes, there are.
Well, we were talking about earlier before the meeting started. We were talking and it came up at the city council meeting last night, is that we have to get it out on the various websites because. We know that if it gets out there, people will see it and they're gonna buy it. But right, and we didn't have meetings for 2 months, so we had it on the table and we didn't have the meeting, so it just kind of.
Right,
Yeah.
we ran out of energy or something.
2 months, yeah.
We'll make sure this gets blown up on our website, and then Jill said that the city can't promote it, but they can put a link to their website to our website.
Okay.
And so with some of the fish on there, people will say, how do I do that? You can go to the website and they'll get an answer and they can start buying fish.
Be a good article for the Herald too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a marketing committee.
Right.
They're
If
working
you
on.
can't catch it, you can buy it,
Yeah,
you know?
that's a good catchphrase.
So the next item, which is the Arts and Parks Foundation wall mural proposal. Oh, wait a minute, in fact, we also have a brochure that on this, that we'll be using to get out to as many people as we can. And we're calling it legacy, which for you have your name on the fish established legacy for having contributed to the artwork. The mural, we discovered through a couple of our members that there were photos in the museum and they were brought to us that showed the women who worked at the mill, and this was a mill here, as well as women who worked out in the farm. And there's nothing here that recognizes that there were these women that, they're right up next to the logs, working with the logs, or they were in the mill, working in the mill. So the idea came, why don't we create 2 more murals based upon those 2 photos to go above the roll-up doors that are on that side of the other room. And so we talked to the same artist that did this work and who also did the murals that are already in there. And she gave us an estimate of $2,000 she could produce some murals. So we became, one of our other goals is to be an advocate for this. So we presented to the city and asked the city if they could do that. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot of money right now, but they don't have it. That's a beautiful. So we will be working with the city to look for a grant for the foundation to have those murals produced and put up on the wall. And the city has been very gracious in offering their staff assistance in preparation for grant and preparing grant applications. And one that we're looking at now that's a very, very new one. And I kind of think this is one that would get an interest. Is the the past owner of the Seahawks that passed away, Paul Allen. Paul Allen's foundation has now opened up their foundation for applications to for grants for artwork throughout the communities in Washington and individuals. So we're thinking that we would definitely go after that kind of agreement. There's lots of grant opportunities for art. And I think, frankly, the Snohomish County Arts Council, they help on this kind of thing. So we're going to go after that. Well, I think I answered any questions on that one. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I don't see you hanging around.
You're still welcome to stay.
Now we're in to the 5-year park plan. And that should be at the end of your.
So I did attach a copy of the 5-year plan. At this time, this has went through city council and they gave their nod to accept it as is. Believe I was only 3 or 4 weeks in when the request came out to put together a 5-year plan for the departments. So we set a deadline and started working towards it. As a department, what I did with this 5-year plan was make it a very high arching, high level goals and topics that we need to work on in order to address all of the needs of the Parks Department. So I did include Q4 of 2022, just because it was work in progress when we went ahead and had this go through City Council. And then you'll see through 2023, we broke it down into the 4 quarters and then proceeded with years all the way through 2027. There's still a lot going on that is not on this paper. It does not include projects or any of the smaller tasks that staff is taking on. But the first thing that we did already accomplish was walking every single park and making notes of every single thing that we need to fix. Either things that were broken or that need to be improved. It didn't go into visioning or future planning. But we have that list organized now. We're finishing up the last of the scoring so that we can rank it based on what way our staff will be able to tackle it. Some of these things will be easy 15-minute fixes. Other things could take a couple years to actually get to, just with resources that are available. So that is almost completely done at this point. Going into Q1, some of the stuff was already started, but we're going through a parks maintenance plan that'll be used for our internal guidelines. We're going through all of the administrative policies and procedures. That includes applications and public information that is available. We're also going through all of our codes, laws, and ordinances. We're assessing the community, going through identifying classes, events, and recreational needs. Some of this stuff won't be completed until Q2. Starting in Q1, which is now, we will begin all of our playground inspections. They're going to be nearly full audits where we really comb every public playground that is on our property or that is managed by us. Some of the playgrounds on our property are not managed by us, but we still do need to look at that from a city perspective. From there, we'll be looking at the lake safety program. We'll be revising anything that's needed and looking at the buoys regulations, how our staff is doing that. Our parks field staff are the ones that physically go out to place buoys on the lake and take care of safety needs. We're going to be looking at public facing maintenance and operations management standards. We'll be going through all the public and private recreational areas and those use agreements. We'll be going through all of our marketing, including our internet process. That will be finished in Q2 of 2023. Beginning that same quarter is internal park needs assessment, ending Q3. We'll then go into vision and mission statements, a staffing analysis towards the end of summer so that we can prep for 2024 budget and what our needs are. We'll then focus on making sure we have an ADA transition plan, continuing with the strategic plan, future park acquisitions, comprehensive plan, and then our system master plan. All of the items that we'll be doing are going to mimic that of becoming an accredited parks and recreation department. And so when the time comes, a lot of the footwork is already done there. So that is a big picture of what the next 5 years look like. And at the bottom, I went ahead and gave the priorities that I have set as the director, and the city councils approved it. And this is how we're going to make decisions for the entire department moving forward. So number one, we need to ensure that our parks are safe for all of our users. Then we need to improve our park usability, making sure that we have a variety of recreational opportunities and have accessibility. The third is going to be managing and maintaining all of our current parks to our city standards. And then the fourth step of acquiring or building new parks and recreational opportunities to increase the city service level. And so when we start looking at new requests that are coming in and internal needs, if it's not meeting those things in order, it'll be, yes, that's important, but it'll sit until we can get to it, as we want to make sure that we provide safe and usable parks first. Does anybody have questions?
Yeah, so on the fourth priority there to acquire new parks, I see over here we have county park acquisitions. I'm assuming that would be like the Lake Stevens Community Park and Caballero Hill Park. Is there a plan to actually purchase new land within the city for park space, or is it more just acquiring the existing county parks?
Jill can speak to that a little bit more. We do have a comprehensive plan that says how we acquire new parks.
We are always looking for properties to acquire, to add to our park system. Our, of course, challenge with most, of people buying property right now, and their challenge is the cost of, lots that we could develop into active recreation sites are generally sites that are also able to be developed into other, uses. And so, with the limited amount of funds that the city has for acquisition, we have we've sent out letters to, we've identified parks that would be usable property space, and we've sent out letters to the homeowners just stating we would like the right of first refusal on the property, and letting them know we're interested in this. And so once they're ready to move on, and, if they would give the city a shot at purchasing those. So those letters have gone out. We've had a couple of the letters that we had sent out now seeing plats being developed on them. So we know that they've gone a different way on it, but we still, definitely identify. We've looked in the deficit area that we have is going to be on the southeast section of the city. So we've targeted some of the properties there. Some of them were already in the process of selling. And then some, we didn't hear anything back on the letters that we sent. But yes, in answer to your question, we're always looking to acquire properties. So the county acquisitions would be it's separate, from the city acquisitions of properties as they become available.
So just another question on the county acquisitions, would that, when you're doing something between like a county and a city, is that typically like something that just is passed over for operations and such, or would the city have to pay?
In the two parks that we've acquired from the county, Davies Beach and Sunset, we did not pay for the county. We took over the maintenance and operations. And then they deed the property over to us.
Any other questions? Comment?
So I just like to say that, this is nice, this 5-year plan, but what is the 5-year plan for the parks that we already have? When are they going to be completed? Is there any time frame or anything of, possibly when they're going to be done?
Are you talking about the current parks where you've been working on the plans and we're working through those? Yeah, so that would be our project list specifically. And if you'd like at the next meeting, we'd be happy to bring through the project list.
So I think we're more interested in that than the bureaucratic stuff.
Sure, hey, no problem, I understand that. Every year with budget, we have the capital plan that is adopted. And so part of that was the actual financial piece and what gets adopted there. And then it becomes a matter of resources. How many people do we have in engineering to oversee the projects, to get the contract signed, all that. And so I can tell you right now that we have solidified what that list is. The city originally had 32 very large capital projects to complete in the next 1 year. That was too many. And so that's where we had to go through and say, in reality, just time-wise, with even the opportunity for parks with working in the water, there's only a few good months that you can get those types of projects done. So we can bring that forward next time.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
It's just because, you read everything about, other surveys, stuff that the people like Stevens want the parks. And, they've been hearing for years that we're gonna have this and that, but, nothing's come to fruition. We're still waiting to, finish Eagle Ridge, Frontier Heights. And so I'd like to see that if we have, at least it'll give us an idea when these could be completed.
And I will say too, that we have been doing quite a bit of work in parks to that point. So we have constructed new parks as well as redeveloped Frontier Heights in the first phase of that. So we hope the community can see that as well, that there has been, definitely moves that have moved forward. The other item, like such as Eagle Ridge in the second phase of Frontier Heights, because we were successful on grants for those parks, our timeline has to change because of the funding.
Oh.
So for instance, in the legislative session, we'll determine the funding amount for the WWRP, which is part of the RCO grant round. And that will see how far down the list we're funded. So if we get a lot of money through the legislature for RCO, we will be funded. If we start that project before that process, we will lose the funding.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of wait and see what happens. So that puts us also in then the next round of when the contract is actually drawn. So by the time the contract is drawn, for instance, for an RCO grant, and we get the grant, that's at the end of July or the beginning of August. Then to put that out to bid, you would be running into the rainy season. So that automatically goes on pause until the next dry season in the next spring to construct. So there is, it's a complex formula, but putting all those pieces together, that's what assigns our priorities. You know, that goes into the decision of the capital facilities
We'll let
plan and the
the folks
capital
on the
improvement
other-
plan.
Projects list.
Yes.
Yeah, if the list could tell us what that kind of process, like that Eagle Ridge is in these steps,
Yeah.
that would help us to understand what we're doing as well. Because I know at Frontier Heights, we have a plan to do this year to put in the
Pickleball courts and
pickleball and
the multi.
yes,
purpose
multi-use.
So, and that's a great example of, we are waiting in the ledge right now to see what's gonna kick loose. So, we know we're pretty certain we're going to get one of the grants because we scored really highly on that. But under the other grant that we applied for, you know, we have to see how far down the funding list they're going to make it. So those grant applications, if everything goes exactly according to plan, we won't even have it in front of our staff until the end of July and the beginning of August to sign on. So if we do any work on that project, it jeopardizes the funding.
And what's your view or the city's view on to go one park at a time and get them done instead of spreading it all out, just go down the list and get them completed?
Or do you do a little at a time at each park?
Yeah, instead of spreading it all out, little here, little here, little here, it's like, let's finish this park right here and just get it done with.
Well, go ahead. If you,
Yeah, what I'm thinking about that is there's so many different steps from the engineering to the land use to all the permits to the funding piece as well. That's why you see so many different projects that you've touched and worked on plans, and it goes through all those public processes to make sure that we get the feedback. And so we'll always be juggling a few different projects at once. And then because we can only really do the bulk of construction during your summer months, you will commonly see 2 or 3 of them move forward also within the same window. So yes, we definitely want to make sure we don't spread ourselves too thin. We don't want 20 different balls being juggled in the air and for them to be delayed. But I think a lot of the delays that I've seen looking at the project so far have either been land use funding or internal resources in order to complete them. So the city's definitely been going a million miles an hour with different projects through all of the departments.
Right.
So we do have a focus to complete a big bulk of them this year.
and that's all providing that we don't have any safety issues that arise, like floating docks at Davies Beach, that take the resources for that. The other aspect of it is also when we phase a project. So we know that when we phase a project like Frontier Heights, it allows us to obtain more funding. So if we go into it and we say we're going to do it from A to Z at this time, we will not be able to diversify those resources. So for grant or for legislative asks. So sometimes, and we will be happy to go through, that list and talk about those. I know Eagle Ridge does come up. We are still not in grant contract. So we're working, I just worked on it actually today. for some additional information that National Parks is asking for. So although we thought we were going to be in contract in the summer of 21, we are still not in contract, and we are now in the winter of, 2023. So, we're optimistic that we'll be in contract soon. But, some of it is out of our
I
control.
just don't want to get to a point where the people that visit the park. Why isn't it done? Why, it's been like this for, a year and a half now. What's the process? So that's my concern.
Any other discussions, questions, comments?
I have a question on the former dump site that's kind of in the southeast portion of the city. Is that still on the table for potential acquisition?
There's been discussions on the back end. Yes, it would be mainly available for your low impact type recreation. So it's been talked about even since came for my interview, honestly. So it's on the thought, but we don't have a timeline or any specifics being built out on that yet.
Well, I love that you made this plan because it is helpful to see what your priorities are. And I think this is a very, I like how you prioritized it. I think that's a really good job that you did as far as figuring out what's most important. Safety is most important, of course. I did have a question about this when you said that we're going to look at playgrounds that are not in our control. Is that something like at Cavallero that we're talking about, or are we talking about the neighborhood parks?
There are a lot of agreements on city property. So what we're speaking about specifically is either city-owned playgrounds or city-owned land.
Okay,
And so there have been several different playgrounds, recreational playgrounds installed on city property. Normally, we're referring to HOAs. And so through that process, we're reviewing to make sure that they're safe, that we have everything up to par. And so it goes hand in hand with, once we get through all the playgrounds, we're also looking at the land use agreements to say, is that agreement effective for this playground to be on this property? And also, is that playground still safe to be open to the public? If you don't have a playground that is fully gated in, then it's essentially a public playground, whether or not it is intended to be.
oh,
Right, so if the intent is for it to be only for an HOA, but anybody can walk up to it, then it has that public playground rules. And so we're just gonna assess everything on city land
gotcha.
from the recreation perspective
Okay,
to make sure that the city knows what we have.
so the HOAs often don't own the land that they put the,
Like,
'cause we bought-
but on some of them, yes.
interesting.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with how the property is deeded once it's developed.
Yeah,
It was really popular in the 90s and early 2000s to take storm detention or open space and dedicate it to the city. So then subsequent to that dedication, at some point, the HOA will take a vote to put a playground on it. And so oftentimes we didn't know that had occurred.
oh,
And so we have to do the deed research and the plat research to find out how the city came into ownership of the property. If it was for recreation, or was it for open space? Was it for storm detention? And then, move forward from there.
gotcha. All right, one final call, questions, comments, concerns? Okay, thank you. So now, so we're not having a parks update at this time.
I did not prepare a parks update, based on the lull, in the holidays. There wasn't a lot going on.
Yeah.
And then we had our joint meeting last night, so.
Just checking.
no worries.
Okay, so
I-
board member reports. Roger, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm just saying that, I'd like to say that we've had the last 2 months off. We're moving forward, it's time to get moving.
All right. Don?
Nothing at this time.
Maria?
Well, I just want to give a shout out. I mean, I know a first parks director, so I know that this is kind of some of the boring stuff at the beginning. But it's setting that foundation, so I appreciate that. That's it.
Carl?
You mentioned, asked about the garbage, the old garbage dump. That's quite the complicated issue to get that into a park, and it's gonna take a while.
Yeah,
It's probably 70+ years with garbage. And seagulls, the lake used to turn white with seagulls, so. It's made
Didn't Russ say that methane gas was the biggest issue there? Because
Yeah.
it's just been there for so long.
Bu-
They don't know
bubbly-
how bad it is.
It's bubbling up and
Yeah.
stuff.
they have a collection system that it drains into tanks and then they take those, they actually take trucks, fill those trucks up and then export that somewhere else. I met with the county and the city and some other folks there, as part of kind of looking to build a mountain bike park kind of thing at some point. And yes, it sounds like that'll be a long-term project, but it sounded like, you know, they're gonna continue to do that extraction of, I can't remember what Russ called the
Leachate.
leachate, yes, thank you. But you could do low impact things such as trails and whatnot there where you're not putting heavy items on that. There's some sort of a membrane underneath the soil that
Right.
is covering all the former garbage. So just seems like a good opportunity for a large piece of land to make some trailers.
That's a large piece.
Yeah, I think it's 40 acres.
We almost bought some property on the other side of it. Remember that, Carl? On the other side of the dump?
Yeah, it
We
wasn't
took a
that
walk through there.
school funding property or something.
Yeah, it was too wet.
And then it was too wet, yeah.
That's the story of our lives.
Yep.
Susan, do you have anything? Thanks,
I
Carl.
don't know, I can beat that topic, I would say, garbage is exciting.
Brian?
I did have a question about the art installation that's supposed to be going here for the kind of the water tower. Do we have any updates on that?
We do, we are pouring the footing for that, I believe, on the 27th, weather permitting, and then we'll be taking possession of the sculpture to get it in.
Awesome.
We're pretty excited.
Um,
We saw it, this park staff went out there to take a look at it, and it's, in my opinion, I think it's better than I imagined it. So, and it is larger than we imagined it, so we're very pleased, so
Yeah,
we're
excited to see
excited.
that. I did talk with Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance yesterday. They, in terms of putting the kind of the initial plan together on where they might think the best use for the pump track would be on the Centennial Woods property or potentially on the Puget Sound Energy property. They're working on that. They did tell me too that if we're planning on doing a paved pump track, that they're now referring all paved pump tracks to Velo Solutions, which is the same company that did the one in Leavenworth. There's still potential that they can do it if there's like a couple of items. One, if all of the volunteers and funding and resources line up and the city doesn't have the funding to pay for, because Velo Solutions is extremely expensive from what I've heard. So there's still a possibility of getting Evergreen to do that, but right now they said they're going to be referring paved pump tracks to Velo Solutions. But they said they would still commit to designing and putting a potential use and best use of space analysis for us.
Colton?
Finding the mute button again here. Nothing from me. I appreciate it though. Glad to be back and hopefully I'll be recovered and my family will be done with this COVID for next month's meeting.
Oh, no, COVID, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I feel like we're used to it now.
So for me, I noticed, well, I got a text that said that we have in February the open house for Eagle Ridge. And I was wondering if you could send out the plan, the current plan to us now so we can refresh ourselves as to what is happening or planned to happen.
I'll be happy to. And that's was gonna be in my upcoming agenda items report, so
Oh,
I will
nice.
I'll get the plan over to you.
Okay,
We have just the conceptual, just so you know on that one. There's no engineered plans yet.
right, just what we came up with the last time it was reviewed. Okay, so let's see, we don't have a council member here, so no council report. Does anybody have anything for an upcoming agenda item they'd like to see? Feel that I beat you to the punch?
So as of today, we are advertising that your next park board meeting on February 8th will be hosting the open house for the community to come in and share some insights and on the conceptual plan for Eagle Ridge. We have had that master plan was done in 2010, so it's 12 years old, and we know right away that there's some items on there that will have to change. So I'm going to give you the conceptual that we have from that with some minor updates. We had, for instance, the playgrounds. We had 2 different playgrounds at opposite ends of the property. We know now that the usage is that families want to keep different age groups together at the same playground. So those types of things will be dusted off, and the elements that are captured in the Eagle Ridge plan are a really nature-based theme. When we went out for grant funding and were awarded the grant, we mentioned, that it's an amphitheater or an outdoor classroom, but parking for buses and playground. So some of those larger amenity items, they can move on the site, but they can't be taken out of the grant contract. But we want to get it in front of the board and the community and just see what are we missing and what do we need to add. And so we'll be looking forward to that. The signs will go up tomorrow.
Okay,
So we're gonna have a open house here or somewhere else here.
Correct, here.
And then after that, we will discuss at our next meeting, all the information that we've gathered.
So generally on the open house, the community comes in, the park board discusses it. So I can get a feeling of what you're feeling when you see the plan, how you like it, what you want to see changed, if anything.
Just like the sunset.
Exactly. So it'll be the same process, and then we'll come back with any changes to it. And then at the next meeting and let you know our findings, and folks that can't come to the meeting can always email in their requests. So we get quite a bit of that as well. And that'll occur sometimes before the meeting, sometimes after the meeting. So we'll make sure that you guys are aware of.
And then the other thing about that is there's been discussion of bike trails,
Mhm.
and is that gonna be in the plan or no? It's just gonna, but if we get enough input, then we have to start thinking about it more.
Well, right now, the limits of the grant and the development are the upland portions. So any of the downhill portions of it are where the mountain bike trails are proposed, would not be part of the grant contract or part of that development. And generally, those types of trails are not something we engineer and have a construction company do. We would have them complement the area, so we wouldn't be doing massive grading changes or anything like that. We know it's a sensitive, critical area as well. So we would work with mountain bike companies or mountain bike interests to get those trails developed, but they would be outside the scope of the redevelopment or the conceptual plan.
So what would the timeline be to be able to start talking about potentially getting people in there to build some trails? Is there restrictions in terms of the sensitivity of the area in terms of what can be done? That is there any timeline and when maybe we could discuss that?
So my plan right now would be to make major progress on everything that we have outstanding and open, as we have a lot. So as I'm looking at the list that we'll bring forward to next meeting, it is an estimated $11 million in outstanding projects. And so to continue to do outside of that, it comes down to the resources and the money. So what my plan is right now with all those trails through Eagle Ridge on the department side is to first inventory what we have, to walk it with GIS, get some GPS maps to figure out where are those current trails. And then from there to start analyzing what the potential would be, anything that we can get volunteer groups to help with. If it can lighten our load, then it can advance quicker. And so that's the resource, is just our internal staff not having the capacity.
Yeah, I could tell you that we would be able to get volunteers to build all of the trails, as well as like bridges and other features. I'm part of a mountain bike club in Japanese Gulch where we built like 10 miles of trails with berms and jumps and all kinds of other things, completely without any funding or anything. So I think that would be pretty easy to get going, just in terms of, you know, cutting trails and building some bridges or whatnot kind of thing.
You know, the Department of Corrections built all the walking trails.
There's only one trail in there right now.
Yeah.
I've walked it a
Well,
couple of
it's been,
times.
it needs to be redone.
Yeah,
So Jill, you're saying that we can't put the trails and the dirt bike in the master plan? Is that what I'm understanding?
Just in the upper part.
It would be a separate project. And so the current project you're looking at Eagle Ridge
It's
is
just the
that
upper
upper
part.
bound.
Okay.
Yeah, and so if you're going to then tackle the projects of trails or mountain bikes, it's just a separate project. It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen at the same time if they align. But both of them could
Yeah.
be
Well,
independent of each other. essentially.
Or our master plan was everything we want to do with that location. So that's why I'm I get that there would be two different projects, but I thought that we would make a plan for what the future, what we want to have, all of it.
So what's that?
I didn't see one before.
So the master plan that was done in 2010 was a really long process, and it went out for several community outreaches. And so that work, we want to honor the work that was done in 2010.
Okay.
That this was what was the priority at that time. Subsequent to that, in 2021, we were approached to have mountain bike trails at that location. So instead of jumping and doing the mountain bike trails that were not part of the original grant application, we want to make sure that we're not getting ahead of ourselves and doing work so we're not master planning the site.
Gotcha.
We're looking at that conceptual that was done during that first master plan
Okay.
and making sure that that's brought to fruition.
Okay.
And I know that that's been a high priority for the park board. I've known that since I started working at the city of Lake Stevens. So I know that that's something that we want to make sure that we're moving forward on. The mountain bike trails are not simplistic, but they're a different type of construction than what we would be doing in a park master plan development.
Okay.
So I think that that's probably the shortest answer, is that
Okay.
if we jump and start to grab in, you know, other things, and like Sarah mentioned, it's not that they can't happen at the same time, but we do want to make sure we don't have some scope creep. We need to keep our scope
Sure.
where it is.
Sure.
To do that. And then the mountain bike trails, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but those are really independent of the park use on the upland portions. That park is really unique. It's a beautiful park. And it's like two different parks. One is very natural, soft trails, and then the plateau is a perfectly flat, usable, active recreation site.
Going back to the bike thing, would it have to be approved by us as a parks board to send it forward to the city council, or would you guys just jump to the city council? Because that's something that I think needs to have some discussion on. I mean, we've talked about it before, but I think it needs to be rehashed.
So you are the body that hears the park development plans. And then you can forward recommendations to the city council. The trails at Eagle Ridge, we did discuss at a previous meeting about the installation of the trails there. We know that there were some concerns about conflict of use, and so there would be development of those trails to make sure that the walkers were safe on them. Any additional, you know, discussion we can definitely have
I think it needs to be rehashed.
at the
Yes.
park level.
That was a couple of years ago. wasn't it?
I think it was in 2020.
21,
I think it might have been 2020.
2020.
And I'm would encourage all the members online, the Eagle Ridge Master Plan is available.
Oh, it's
And that way
online.
you can go through it, you can get familiar with it
Okay,
as to what was done at that time.
oh, it is online.
Yeah.
Okay. And where exactly do we find it? Under,
I had Googled Eagle.
you just
Ridge-
Googled it?
I
and
had
then-
Googled Eagle Ridge Master Plan Lake Stevens and it took me
Okay.
straight to the document.
Okay,
Once you get on the main Lake Stevens WA.gov. Go to governments, navigate over to the Parks and Recreation page, and then it looks like if you scroll down. Just trying to find it right now. I believe that there's a section for Eagle Ridge. Yep, if you scroll all the way down. To the list where it has all of the parks inventory, all of the different parks, there's a hyperlink specifically for Eagle Ridge Master Plan.
nice. Thank you.
Yes.
I do have one more thing. I wanted to know if you can tell us how much funding did the council give to the Parks and Recreation this year?
Yes, so through the budget process. I have not asked for a large increase in funding, so we essentially took the $20,000 that was over in the Parks and Recreation side of the planning department. And moved it over to the Parks Division that was under Public Works. And so what I did with that was ask for, I want to say an 8% increase for inflation. It might have been 10% in my calculation. And that's that. I did not ask for a huge increase other than just for inflation. I then asked for a park ranger full-time. Our full-time position did not get approved this year. But we did get approved for 2 additional seasonal workers through summer. That was with an understanding that I'm treading careful into making changes for the Parks Department. I'm really in the analyzing mode and seeing how it's going to work now that we have a specific Parks Division where our labor isn't split between the different divisions of Public Works or other city functions.
Mhm.
We've already made efforts to make sure we have, proper tools and all of the trucks are outfitted correctly. So little changes for efficiency and effectiveness. I think creating plans like that you saw in the 5-year plan can really help with the efficiency and making sure that we aren't just adding more labor for the sake of doing that. When we need either additional labor or additional funds, even if it is mid-budget cycle, I made it clear that with my proposal, we would come forward and ask for it if the need arises. I just didn't want to double the budget for the purpose of asking for more money, as I know all of our departments are trying to do the best we can with our resources available.
Okay, so does that mean that the projects that we have out there for this year are pretty much going to be funded through grants?
We have a substantial amount of grants secured, but we also have money in different categories, whether that was from the ARPA funds or the other reserve money that is out there. So we have 3 or 4 different funding sources when it comes to capital projects.
Mhm.
The funding I was talking about was for operations specifically.
Okay,
Yes, and so everything that's on the list I'll be bringing to you next time, those are moving forward and have been approved with the budget. So immediately anybody today can get on the city website, go and look at the approved 2023 budget. Skip to that capital section and you'll see the list of everything that was approved in the dollar amount.
okay,
Now, what it doesn't tell you is what does it mean for that project? Is it just in the planning phase? Is it in the engineering phase? Is it in the actual construction phase? And that's the information you guys really want, is to see that timeline of advancement.
right,
So I'll put together a 1-page sheet, kind of like you saw for the 5-year capital plan, that'll integrate what is the planning phase, the
That would be
permitting
great.
phase, the construction phase, and that way you can see how it progresses. Understanding that it's a domino at any point, it could be
Right.
pushed forward for various reasons.
right.
I was gonna ask one more question, and that is, the litigation fees for new construction going to the parks, is that still going? Where when the construction people make housing development, put so much money into a fund?
The
How
impact
much is
fees.
in that fund, and is it all controlled for the parks, or does the city stick their hand in there and take some out?
Park impact fees are collected at the time of building permit issuance, and those are dedicated park funds.
Okay.
So last night we heard that the city had hired a professional grant writer. Do we think that will impact quite a bit, or do we have any estimates on how, what kind of an impact that'll have?
They are writing a job description to hire a grant
Oh,
writer.
okay, so-
I believe that the estimate is to try to get them onboarded in either Q2 or Q3. And the other thing to understand is that is a single grant writer for the entire city, so would be acquiring large federal grants would be their target. For things like transportation, large parks, economic development, all of those. So it's likely they would help in acquiring some grants. But I know that our staff, Jill specifically, writes the bulk of the grants that are gifted to parks this time.
Jill, do you know how much
Thanks,
money
Jill.
they got last year for the litigation fees?
I don't
Okay,
have. the
I was
number
just
in front of
curious,
me.
because there's so much building going on, I think they'd be a pretty good pile.
Yeah, and those are used for development and acquisition, so those will be. I can, definitely bring back information on there, but I wouldn't even hazard a guess on it. The other thing too, that, for the grant writer, as a great question, when a city, they apply for grants in all different areas, from stormwater grants to, facility grants to, road grants, sidewalk grants. So the person, that is eventually hired for that position will have a really, and then there's planning grants. So those are like the consultants that even write the planning documents. So there's quite a broad range of grants that that person will be focusing on. So we don't know at this point how much park grants will be a factor in that person's, position or not. This, park down here, we received quite a bit of outside funding for it. So, and that was done through not park grants, actually through different commerce grants. So.
Sorry, one more question I had. The idea to potentially eventually get a pathway around the whole lake, like a safe pathway, would that be considered something parks would be doing, or is that more like city infrastructure?
So that is in our park plan. It is an acquisition priority. We know that that's a long game. It's interesting, people don't want to give us 12 feet of their waterfront. I don't know why, but so we are realistic about that. If we have it as a goal, we're definitely, nothing would make us happier or the community happier than having that. We know it's going to be a very lengthy process.
But you're already out asking for easements, right?
So as property developed, we'll be looking for sidewalks, see those types of, to be built out to try to make connections. So, but there's no nexus
Can they
to,
use eminent domain for something like that if they really wanted to?
it's a great question. I don't know. if
We're
I
not
can
there
answer
yet.
for it. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's no like actual just predefined easement for sidewalks next to the road?
There isn't, so now modern day, yes, when we have dedications, even if the road's not built, generally the right of way line is wider than what's been built. A lot of these lots were developed prior to any type of thought that the road would even be widened, much less a sidewalk. So in areas, especially, you'll see this really prevalent down on East Lake Stevens Road or South Lake Stevens Road. That there's just no room. There's the roadway, and then there's not even, like a bike path next to it. Those areas, there was no dedication taken at the time that those houses were built. So that would have to be something that would be strategically planned, and, there would have to be a nexus for that to happen.
Thank you, Sarah and Jill, for letting us go back to our staff reports and get some more questions out there. All right, Colton, I'm just checking back in with you. Do you have anything else?
No, thanks. That's it for me.
Okay. So no other agenda items? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're adjourned.